Part 34. Infinite Doomsday Start Draws Luodu Mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 331. No matter how cheap that thing is, it still costs more than 20,000 points after discounts. It also requires a lot of special materials. Although Isandra did not specialize in alchemy, she knew the biggest characteristics/flaws of this path and couldn't help but sigh. Would it be too easy to be controlled by external objects? Well, it is indeed a typical elemental mage's thinking. Luodu couldn't help but complain in his heart, but said directly, with all due respect, in my opinion, the mages are not very dependent on the outside world. How could it be? The witch subconsciously defended her path as a mage. Lugger did not wait for her, but continued, no matter which faction of mage you specialize in, the fundamental core is still how to control and transform magic power, right? Magic power fills the entire world, is everywhere in heaven and earth, and is inexhaustible. It seems like it's more convenient to use it, and you don't have to worry about a wide variety of alchemy materials. But what if there's no magic left? Isandra herself was captured by the enchantment in the dungeon of the enchantment, so she naturally knew that the relics of the lost had no magic power. It was precisely because there was no magic power there that she had just come out of there with only a few magic gems from monsters that accidentally strayed into the underground. In addition, based on age, Maria was a native of the lost who was born before the cataclysm. They have been together for so long, and of course Isandra knows that there is no such thing as magic in the real world of the lost. Therefore, Ruger's if is real. As soon as she figured it out, she heard Luodu continue. That's one of the main reasons why I prefer the mechanic path. I am a lost person. One day I will find a way to leave here and go to the larger world of lost people. If I major in magic, I will face a sudden drop in combat power. On the contrary, I want to learn the ability to use magic stones to cast spells. With my current magic stone reserves, I can use them for a long time. That's good. Using special tools to achieve specific goals is the essence of the mechanic's path. I understand your concerns, Isandra nodded. However, by now, maybe the entire world of the lost is already filled with magic. That's not bad. At least I can easily harvest magic stones there. Lugger smiled. At this point, Isandra knew that Lugger had not only made up his mind to stick to his own path, but also established a mature system based on it that was inclusive and continued to progress. In this case, her few words could not change Ruger, so she said no more. On the contrary, she herself became very interested in Ruger's path as a mechanic. After all, if she takes up this path at the same time, the benefit to her small team will be immediate. Not to mention that he and Li Min can use magic stones to cast spells, but Aja and Maria rely heavily on the lost weapons. In this way, she and Lugger became competing with each other. Luodu taught her some methods of making weapons and props specially designed for Li Ji and Maria, while Isandra taught her as much lightning magic as possible. But soon, the two of them hit a bottleneck. After Ruger learned all the third level, character level 18 skills, and previous magics, the fourth level magic was temporarily unable to be mastered because the activation method was too complicated. It's not completely impossible, but if it takes half a minute to cast a fourth level magic, it has no practical significance. On Isandra's side, although she knew how to repair and maintain some common weapons and even make them when there were enough parts, she was unable to make these special parts with ordinary materials. After all, it is a capability supported by the entire industrial system, which is much more difficult than assembling finished products with parts. When they hit a bottleneck here, the two of them didn't waste time. They left each other notes on their experiences and the like, and then parted ways to say goodbye. Luodu watched the witch walk back to the tent, and was about to go back to his own when he heard the witch who had just entered the tent scolding the two little guys inside who were not sleeping yet. You're not sleeping, are you? You're energetic, aren't you? Then just use meditation instead of sleeping. Start. Listening to the two little guys begging in vain, they finally had to obey the orders and do boring meditation. Lugger had no intention of going in to save people. Instead, he looked cheerful and walked slowly towards his tent. Early the next morning, Luodu was holding Taya in his arms to catch up on his sleep, when he heard Anya barging in a hurry. As a result, the little girl saw that the two people here were sleeping on the same bed again. She yelled "Ah!" Her face turned red and she ran out of the tent again. However, she still turned her back to the tent and shouted, "Lu, brother Lu, Amin said he wants to take me with him to go scouting on Dawang. Can I go?" "Are you going to work shifts so soon?" Lugger subconsciously calculated how the four Feng Xiang Taijia man could arrange things like this, but after thinking about it, he felt that he really didn't need to take care of these things. Seeing that Anya was still waiting over there, he quickly replied, "Okay. Yeah, I'm leaving then. You don't have to wait for me for lunch today. I brought dry food." Good guy, Ruger thought, how much does this little guy want to ride in a helicopter? You must know that the various delicacies in Ruger's food vending machines are countless times more delicious than Ruger's big pot dishes. Even if Anya is not as greedy as Tia, which meal has she skipped on weekdays? Today, she actually took the initiative to say that she would not come back for lunch. Strange, really strange. After sending Anya away, Ruger looked at Tia next to him. She was not affected at all and continued to sleep soundly. He smiled and turned around to continue admiring the pillow, but Sarah's rog guard also ran over. Her words were simple: "In an hour, the general attack will begin." Hearing this, Ruger's sleepiness disappeared immediately, and he immediately turned over and got out of bed and started to dress. However, he was only halfway through when he heard Tia next to him say, "I'll go first." He looked again, and the alchemist, who was still sleeping soundly, had already changed into the leather armor training suit, and ran out of the tent in 2 steps, leaving Ruger with only an infinitely beautiful back. Ruger watched her running farther and farther away, half helpless and half amused, shook his head, quickly sorted out his equipment, and hurried over. There was no other way. According to the plan that the 3 people confirmed after the aftermath of yesterday's battle, the main character of today's general attack on the monster nest in the cathedral was really the super gunner Tia. In the past, Sarah was somewhat limited in how to attack the monster nest. After all, Akara was still alive, and she had to consider the thoughts of the elders of the Blind Sisters. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu Mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 332. If she cares about the old man's feelings, then Sarah had better not do anything like demolishing the cathedral. Google search reading. But if the cathedral is not demolished, Sarah will have to organize an elite team to go deep into the monster's lair and deal with the physical body of Andariel, who is far more powerful than the Bloody Countess of the Tower of Forgotten. The Bloody Countess in the underground labyrinth of the Forgotten Tower is already a nightmare-level leader monster in Lugger's opinion. Sarah evaluates Andariel's physical body as far more powerful than this thing. So what level does it get? Isn't it a direct analogy to the Hell level in the original game? The Bloody Countess at the Nightmare level corresponds to about level 45 in the original game. Sarah, who was judged by Lugger to be at least level 50 plus at the time, was able to defeat this level 45 boss, which was reasonable. As I write this, I hope readers will remember our domain name Taiwan Novel Network rightward arrow. But Hell level Andariel? That's the level 75 boss at the end of the level. If there were a dozen Nephilim who were almost level 50 plus like Sarah to help her, it wouldn't be completely impossible to fight. But the problem is that not many of the other Nephilim can reach 45 in terms of combat power. As for the Rogs, 30 plus is considered elite. If it weren't for the fact that Rog and the others had recently made several arms deals with him, and the actual combat power could no longer be measured simply by physical ability, Sarah really wouldn't have the confidence to fight Andariel. But things are different now. Akara is gone. Almost all ROGs in Rogtown have been taken under Sarah's command. The Akara guards, who most likely had different opinions, also left Rogtown on their own initiative, and their whereabouts are unknown. In this case, Sarah can choose to use a more reliable and feasible method. Demolish the Cathedral of the Blind Sisters. Not only was the cathedral demolished, but the catacombs beneath it were also demolished. By connecting the underground world with the above-ground world, the rich magic power in the underground will naturally spread to the surface. As the underground magic concentration decreases, the levels of monsters there will also decrease simultaneously. Just like what Sarah and Lugger did at the Tower of Forgotten. When it comes to the ability to demolish buildings, Tia, an alchemist master who loves explosions, is the well-deserved number one. In the past, she relied on her own alchemy to make explosives, and the raw materials, time, and energy were a big problem. But now, with Lugger providing materials and even finished products, Tia just bombs, and the efficiency is immediately sky high. This is the biggest reason why Sarah chooses to attack Andariel's lair now. When Ruger arrived at Sarah's command camp, Tia was already driving the Boxer Dog AGM Light 155mm self-propelled artillery and was eager to try it. Sure enough, after Lugger briefly discussed the specific coordination matters with Sarah, Tia was already eagerly urging the Lugger tank soldiers to clear the way for her. Fortunately, she at least didn't forget that she was an artilleryman and a DPS, and she needed tanks to help her take damage. This time the tank is really a tank. Of course, Tia was not the only one who was eager to try the final battle. Rog, who knew the news in advance, was also excited. Seeing this scene, Sarah lamented that it was indeed right not to inform everyone of the plan for the decisive battle. Even if everyone who is notified is reliable, the strangeness they show will be noticed by someone who is interested, and then the information about Sarah's big move in the near future will be exposed to Rogtown and the Order. Seeing that all the actual participants had arrived, Sarah did not say anything due to confidentiality issues, jumped on her Leopard 2A4 first, and was the first to rush out of the camp. There are 3 goals in the first phase of the decisive battle. Dismantle, dismantle, dismantle. The first step was to clear the space by demolishing the few remaining buildings around the cathedral. The second step is to demolish the cathedral and annihilate all the monsters on the entire monastery ground. The third step is to clear away the remains of the monastery ruins, blast open the floor, and expose the catacombs to the ground layer by layer. This task sounds troublesome enough, but in reality it may take several days. There are not many buildings connected to the outer and inner cloisters of the cathedral, but if you want to blast the cathedral remotely, you must first get rid of these obstacles that hinder the trajectory. Sarah had originally fought here before, but a series of problems arose, such as Minerva being abducted by spies of the Order and returned to Rogtown, so this part also came to a standstill. Now that Lugger and Tia are on site to help, this goal should not be difficult to achieve. It was the tank troops that opened the way ahead, attracting the nightmare-level monsters that ran out of various buildings. Under the attack of tank guns, even nightmare-level elite monsters cannot last long. The tanks on the field include Sarah and Ruger's 2 Leopard 2A4s, a modified Little Leopard, and 5 Maxion medium tanks, Plank 4 tank horse add 4th assault gun Grizzly Bear. The Panzer IV is simple and cheap to make. As long as there is enough time, Ruger can guarantee that at least 1 tank will be built every day. Because Anya was dragged by her twin sister Li Min to conduct helicopter reconnaissance, Luge had to be the gunner by himself this time. As for the driver, he just randomly grabbed a human guard who was still on Rog's front line. The 8 tanks are matched with high and low levels, and there is no problem in dealing with the elite level monsters on the front line. Accompanying the tanks were Rog's Inuk armored patrol vehicles. Basically, they are used as infantry fighting vehicles. The MG3 on their roofs, which originally fired 62 NATO standard full-power rifle bullets, has been modified by Ruger into an M2A1 Laoganma heavy machine gun. This is the latest model developed on the basis of the 72 HB heavy machine gun after adding the function of quick detachable barrels and adding flash suppressors. Yes, there is no major change. The most important thing is that the function of quick detachable barrels has been added, which greatly enhances its continuous combat capability. Sarah does not have a real infantry fighting vehicle. If you use M2 to fight those nightmare-level monsters that do not need tank guns to deal with, you need to maintain a certain shooting frequency. So Ruger had to give them this latest model with the best endurance. On the 2 Inux, there is also a quadruple 20mm anti-aircraft gun trailer, which is the kind that Ruger used to fight big dog helicopters in an emergency before. It's just one more. Compared with the 7mm heavy machine gun, these two anti-aircraft trailers are more like the firepower that a real infantry fighting vehicle should have. However, the elite rogues who were advancing with the Inux all had their guns replaced by the Lugers with the large caliber automatic rifles derived from the Barrett anti-material rifles that also used 7mm caliber heavy machine gun bullets. If it weren't for the limited firing rate and the fact that Laogan Ma was too heavy, light armored vehicles like Inuk wouldn't need to be deployed at all, and the rogues would just carry a set of M2s. But no, that thing can't be used by one person. Even if there were gun racks, it wouldn't be suitable for the rogue's style of moving around and relying on mobility to make up for the lack of defense. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shan Mao Ai-chi-ji. Chapter 333. Behind the pseudo-infantry fighting vehicle and the rogue infantry, followed closely by Tia's light self-propelled howitzer. Although there was only one vehicle, because of the perfect cooperation between her and the electronic lifeform Old Noisy, this vehicle's combat power could at least be equal to 3 vehicles. From the moment her vehicle entered the range, the 155mm howitzer fired at the surroundings at a rate of 15 shells per minute, and the muzzle never stopped. The maximum rate of fire of this gun is higher. However, in order to ensure continuous firepower, the two guys deliberately reduced the rate of fire. In this way, coupled with the 3 rogues who were pulled in as coolies and had the skill of ice arrows to continuously circulate and cool down the cooling water in the barrel water cooling module, the continuous firepower of this gun can be guaranteed. However, even so, with Tia's use of it, by the end of this battle, this gun would be almost scrapped. Of course, for her, it was nothing more than taking it over to let Ruger recycle and rebuild it in the logistics space, and then she could take it out and continue to use it. So she didn't hesitate to use the heavy artillery of her beloved car. But it must be said that under her full efforts, the buildings around the inner corridor collapsed quite quickly. Although in the normal battle rhythm, the Luger tank would occasionally change a high explosive grenade to the buildings behind the massive monsters. But the tank gun shells with a caliber of 120mm and 75mm have a very limited charge. At least compared with the 155mm caliber heavy howitzer, it is really limited. Later, Luger felt that the speed of demolishing the building was a bit slow, so he simply distributed a dozen 120mm mortars to Rog to cooperate with Tia to bomb the house. In this way, the speed of demolishing the house on Rog's side immediately went up a level. As more and more walls were blown down, the roofs gradually collapsed due to the loss of load-bearing walls. Along with this, the space for the monster nests filled with magic power became less and less. Then the number of monsters that emerged from the nest and attacked the tank line also dropped sharply. Finally, in the 3rd hour after the war started, the last house building around the cathedral collapsed under a high explosive bomb fired by Tia. Objective number 1 of the first phase was achieved. The tank troops continue to deal with the monsters rushing over. Sarah got out of the right compartment of the Leopard 2A4 turret in time to correct the order. The tank troops and ground personnel troops are divided into 3 groups according to the original plan. Only one group is left to continue to be on guard. Groups 2 and 3 will immediately repair and change equipment. The artillery troops will repair their equipment on the spot. After 1 hour, continue to attack the cathedral. Yes. Understood. After hearing the order, the ROG commanders of each division immediately led their teams to get busy. Tia was an artillery soldier. After hearing the order, she immediately ran out of the AGM gun compartment in the back row and ran to the dark 3-color jungle camouflage Leopard 2 a 4 turret in 2 or 3 steps. Holding the hatch slightly, he shouted to Ruger inside, shift change, I haven't had enough fun yet, let me do it. Go over and help me change the gun barrel, and refill the ammunition in the cabin. I want the high explosive bombs that you have added to bomb buildings, don't fool me with ordinary ones. In the dark green painted Leopard 2, Sarah was about to discuss with Ruger about improving the efficiency of demolishing buildings, but she happened to hear Tia training her husband here. What did she hear? There are bombs specifically for demolishing buildings. Sarah's pretty face immediately smiled charmingly at Tia on the top of the turret next to her, and she jumped over in 2 or 3 steps. Ruger, who was in the gunner position of the 3-color camouflage Leopard 2 tank, was gesturing to Tia to keep quiet, hoping to stop her before she told her about the high explosive bombs for demolishing buildings, but it was too late. As soon as he sighed, he saw Sarah's pretty face with a sly smile flashing out from the top of the tower. My dear, don't you think the demolition progress is too slow? If it goes on like this, those Nephilim teams will soon find out that our purpose is not just to clear out the monastery monster army. Even if there are no spies from the cult, they will pass the information back to Rogue Town through their friends in a few hours at most. This is too dangerous. I came here to ask you if there is anything good that can increase the speed of demolition. Don't worry, I still have enough magic stones here, and I can afford the arms expenses. I promise not to make it difficult for you. After saying that, Sarah also gave Tia a charming wink. Tia was not surprised at all, but just gave her a look of you-know. Seeing this situation, Ruger didn't know that Tia's words just now were not an accident at all, but were to send information to Sarah. After understanding this, what else can he say? He could only smile bitterly, worrying about his future family status, and at the same time, he forced a smile to please the 2 troublesome ladies. How can it be difficult for me? No, if the 2 ladies need it, how can I not help? But you still have to let me explain. The high explosive bomb that Tia mentioned that is specially used to demolish buildings does exist, but it's not that I'm stingy. The main reason is that it was actually a practice work when I was working on the technical problems before. It added a lot of magic gems. So the cost is high and the quantity is not large. The cost is high, Sarah asked with emotion, how high? Could it be that 1 shell requires 1 ordinary magic gem? That's not the case. Ruger shook his head. Well, that's still. Sarah breathed a sigh of relief. Before she finished saying that's not bad, it's not expensive, she heard Ruger continue to say, a 155 mm caliber special high explosive bomb requires 3 ordinary magic gems. What? Even though Sarah was rich, she was shocked by the abnormally high cost. 3 ordinary magic gems. Only 1 grenade? How powerful is this grenade? 1 is at least equivalent to the 10 I just shot, Tia added beside her. Well, that's okay, no, 3 magic gems, but it only saves 9 shells, the cost. Sarah was about to sigh, but then she thought, no, it also saves 9/10 of time. This cost is high, but it's worth it. After calculating the ratio of investment and return, Sarah's eyes gradually became firm, and she looked at Ruger and said, I want this thing. Can all types of magic stones be used? Come first, 50 rounds first. Don't be in a hurry. Ruger waved his hand and said, let's talk about the type first, not all of them will do. It must be a ruby, a purple gem, and a yellow gem. And the size must be in this order: ruby is the largest, purple gem is the second, and yellow gem is the smallest. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shan Mao Ai-chi-ji. Chapter 334. Isn't this request too troublesome? Sarah couldn't help but ask. That's why I only made a few before, Lugger said to the two ladies while climbing out of the turret. In order to get the gems out, I scraped off the magic stone powder from the latter two gems little by little and used them to make other ammunition. In short, the process is complex and costly, and there is no urgent need, so not much is done. Searched can on Google. So, how much can you make in an hour at the fastest? Sarah heard that he was inclined not to do it, so she couldn't help but ask about the output to express her positive tendency. Don't be deceived by this guy. If he really didn't want to do it, he wouldn't tell you so much nonsense. Tia noticed that Sarah was a little nervous and couldn't help but poke the tender flesh of someone's waist. Ah. Really? Sarah looked at Tia, and then looked at Lugger. As a result, Luigi had another fake smile on his face. Hee, Master Tia is the one who knows me. That's right. If I had done this yesterday morning, it would have been so troublesome. However, thanks to Archmage Isandra's teachings last night, these things are much simpler now. 50 rounds of high explosive bombs with added materials for building demolition, right? 1 hour, no problem. Hearing what Ruger said, Sarah felt relieved and couldn't help but punch him angrily. She turned to Tia and said, "You're right anyway. This guy said those words just to trick me. We have to take care of him later." Yeah, Tia nodded fiercely, looking concerned. However, looking at the overly seductive expressions between the two people's eyes, Lugger knew that this so-called cleaning up would most likely happen in some special places. For example, bedroom. In some painful and happy way. However, Luge glanced at his newly improved physique and felt that the threat of cleaning up was still not low for him. With a slight cough, someone hurriedly said to please, "Oh, is just 50 rounds enough? How about doing more for your husband?" "Can we do more?" Sarah's surprise was not fake at all. She knew that Ruger was very good at guns, but no matter how good he was, there was a limit. It is not an easy task to make 50 loaded heavy artillery shells in 1 hour. She had no doubt that he could definitely make these things if given a day or two, but an hour? She was already sweating for him secretly. What's going on now? You can actually do more in an hour? Isn't this a bit too scary? Seeing Sarah's surprised look, Lugger added somewhat proudly, "It's nothing. If it's urgent, I can make 150 for you in an hour." "So many," Sarah couldn't help but exclaimed. When Tia heard this, she immediately interrupted and shouted, "Deal. 150 rounds of high explosive bombs with added materials for building demolition, delivered in 1 hour. If you can't finish it, I'll take care of you." "You guy," Lugger looked at her and said, dumbfounded, "you are most efficient at this time." "That's right. These few shells are not enough for me to fight for a few minutes." "It's not too much at all," Tia said proudly. "Don't think about it. This kind of artillery shell cannot be fired at a rate of 15 rounds per minute." Ruger waved his hand. "The most you can do is fire 8 rounds per minute. It's best to shoot every 10 seconds. And it's best not to have more than 2 propellant packs, which means you'd better launch within 2 kilometers of the target. Because the magic power structure inside is not stable, if the acceleration is too high, or the barrel is too hot, it may detonate the magic power inside in advance. The fun will be great then." "What?" When Tia heard this, her little mouth immediately raised her eyebrows. "Such a troublesome cannonball, I can't get enough of it, it's boring and boring, I don't want it anymore." With that said, she drilled into the turret and said to the two people on the top of the tower as she drilled back, "I don't care, you can find a place to discuss the rest. Get out of my turret, I'm going to fire." Seeing that her interest came and went quickly, and she wanted to play tank cannon in a hurry, Lugger and Sarah couldn't help but look at each other with a wry smile, and hurriedly jumped off the turret. Then, what to do with these shells, Sarah thought for a while and then asked after coming down. Can you fit them into those small tank guns? She pointed to the 75mm tank gun on the Ma Bear medium tank next to her. No, no, the caliber is too small, and the muzzle velocity of the shells is too high, they can't shoot. Ruger waved his hands hurriedly. Then what should I do? Sarah glanced at him angrily. I just said these cannons are useless, right? A certain profiteer insisted on selling them to me. Two different things, Ruger hurriedly shouted. The main gun of the tank is used to deal piercing damage, in order to break through the enemy's defense. Look at those small 75mm cannons. Can they still kill the elite monsters that escaped from the cathedral? This shows that their armor-piercing performance is sufficient. In other words, the 75mm caliber 46x caliber, anti-tank gun uses World War II armor-piercing bullets, so it will not be a problem to defeat nightmare-level elite mini-bosses. Now we want to demolish the building, that is to take another artillery technology route, relying on the blast shockwave of high explosives to damage the building. Although the principle of this route is also relatively complicated, it is simple to implement when it comes down to the artillery we are currently using. The barrel is thicker and thicker, and the shells are longer and larger. Load as much explosives as possible, and load as strong as possible. As long as it doesn't hit you, the range doesn't need to be too high. The key is to hit the target with a heavy and large explosive pack. Speaking of this, Ruger compared the horse bear tanks that were modified from the chassis of the 4th assault gun next to him. I have something made with the same chassis. Those were originally intended to make a few more tanks for you. But since you dislike them, I can just recycle them here, modify them, and make that thing. What? Don't say half a sentence, Sarah asked hurriedly. Hee, wait a minute. Ruger smiled and quickly calmed down to control the chassis of the 4th tank that was being tinkered with on the production line of the logistics space. After a moment, he waved his hands at the relatively flat ground in front of him, and the dazzling white light of Full Metal Alchemy flashed. When the white light dissipated, a strange tank with a chassis that was the same as the horse bear tank, but without a movable turret, and a thick and short muzzle that tilted upwards appeared in front of Sarah. What the hell is this? Sarah was stunned. So ugly. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shan Mao Ai-Chi-Ji. Chapter 335. It's a little ugly at first glance, but it doesn't matter, just take a closer look. Lugger chuckled. Google search reading. Once you get used to it, you won't find it ugly anymore. What? I thought you were going to say that it looks good once you get used to it. Sarah couldn't help but punch him again. Is this still possible? How long have you had this symptom? Lugger asked hurriedly. You're crazy. Sarah could now understand his strange words instantly. What's the name of this thing? After a few moments of banter, she quickly asked back to business. Grizzly, Ruger replied, later model of the Grizzly assault gun. It can also be called a self-propelled mortar, or a Type 4 assault tank. Taiwan Naval Network Rightward arrow. Its 150mm caliber mortar is only 12 times the caliber. It is short and thick. It would be too reluctant to call it a howitzer. It is most suitable to use a mortar. This thing can originally hit high explosive bombs weighing 38 kilograms, with an explosive charge of 5 kilograms. For the task of demolishing buildings, it is professionally matched. And don't worry, Ruger patted the outer armor of this Grizzly self-propelled mortar and said to Sarah, I have strengthened this thing. Now it can shoot a 60-kilogram large high-explosive bomb at least 3 kilometers far. He pointed to the cathedral less than a kilometer away and said, we'll have no problem hitting it. Not counting magic gem materials, high explosives alone can pack 12 kilograms into the 60-kilogram cannon shell. I guarantee that one shot will be able to withstand the dozens of Taya's previous shots. So strong. After hearing Ruger's introduction, Sarah's eyes began to shine when she looked at this ugly-looking self-propelled mortar. It seems that this thing has become ugly in her eyes. Then, how many cars can you get? She asked slowly. Well, if it takes an hour, 3 more cars won't be a problem, Ruger calculated. With 150 rounds of artillery shells, Sarah asked. Oh, let's have fewer shells, maybe 120 rounds. Ruger thought about it. The shells for this thing are easier to make than Tia's 155mm howitzer, otherwise it will have to be folded in half. That's right, Sarah nodded thoughtfully. So you didn't bring those chariots you got from the Bloody Countess that look similar to Tia's vehicle? Ah, Ruger was stunned, and then he realized that Sarah was talking about the 3 PZH-2000 self-propelled howitzers. He hesitated and nodded awkwardly. Forget it, guess it? In fact, Luger got a lot of good things from the underground military camp in the underground labyrinth of the Bloody Countess' Forgotten Tower. Forget about those light armored tanks. After all, quite a few of them were used by Ruger as transport convoys. Either the transport vehicle itself, or a security vehicle accompanying the transport vehicle responsible for guarding. But for other things, it's just a bit of a so-and-so. He got a total of 3 Boxer dogs at that time. In addition to the 155 howitzer version driven by Taya, there is also a 120 mortar version and a 105 assault gun version. Of course, after testing, it was discovered that the wheeled assault gun had no future in the dark world, so the gun was dismantled by Ruger and used as raw materials. Originally, he planned to replace the bare assault gun with this 105mm high-pressure rifled gun after verifying it, but in the end he found that the original 75mm anti-tank gun was enough, so he did not replace it. Instead, after changing some layouts and adjusting some details, he changed the bare assault gun back into a medium tank version and sold it to Sarah. It's those horse-bear tanks. As for the 120mm mortar version, Ruger also removed the Nemo, Numortar, new mortar, unmanned smoothbore mortar turret system from Finland and left it in the second shelter for use as a defensive weapon. The same fate as it was the 105 rifled gun that was mounted back on the Boxer dog. 105 had better luck here. What was left in the shelter was a complete tank. Originally equipped with a 120mm mortar, Ruger was planning to change the Boxer dog to a rapid-fire cannon version, but after encountering the Big Dog helicopter, he decided to equip that thing with a set of twin 35mm anti-aircraft guns. The Boxer dog was used as an anti-aircraft unit in his own tank. Okay, the 3 Boxer dogs have their own places to go, which is understandable, but he still has 7 infantry fighting vehicles. Those 3 Cougar infantry fighting vehicles and 4 Weasel infantry fighting vehicles are the most suitable for Sarah to use now. Sarah is used as an infantry fighting vehicle, but those Inuks with thin skin and few wheels have only an M2A1 Laoganma heavy machine gun. In addition to his and Sarah's 2 Leopard 2A4S, he also has 2 other vehicles. After that, there are the 3 PZH-2000 self-propelled howitzers. Well, actually, he originally planned to sort them out slowly and sell them to Sarah. After just one battle with the Big Dog helicopter, he gained the technology that could shield magic radiation through biological tissue. As a result, he reinstalled the electronic systems that had been removed from these modern tanks, and at the same time began to cultivate radiation-resistant biological tissues in preparation for installation on them. As a result, his plan to gradually upgrade the arms deal encountered some minor twists and turns. To put it simply, he was originally planning to slowly advance the heavy equipment sold to Sarah from the World War II era to the Cold War era, or even the post-Cold War era. As a result, he is now stuck in the late stage of World War II and cannot leave. Originally, This was nothing. After all, Sarah was an ally, and the arms trade with the ally was both sides did not lose out. However, he did not expect that Tia would suddenly do something like that and directly do something to Sarah, the ally. This is troublesome, the ally has become the wife. In this case, how can he deal with the old cars of World War II? So during this period, Ruger did not feel embarrassed to continue to add too many old cars of World War II to Sarah. Those good cars of the Cold War are waiting for the cultivation of radiation-proof biological tissues for modification, and they cannot be taken. So, he can only work hard on individual weapons. What large-caliber assault rifles, what 120 mm light mortars that can be used by 2 people, etc. However, the 3 self-propelled howitzers mentioned by Sarah are really different from these. He has completed the modification of the electronic chip quick-release box of that thing, just ready to release it at a critical moment so that Tia and Laukoya can cooperate in a round of saturation bombardment. Who knew that Tia would suddenly come to him and talk about the high-explosive bomb, and Sarah caught him red-handed. He was only thinking about how to improve the production of high-explosive bombs with the magic stone that Isandra taught him last night, and left the 155 howitzer, which was difficult to make, behind. Now that Sarah mentioned this thing, he was embarrassed, and it was complicated to talk about it. 1 hour, 4 self-propelled mortars, 120 rounds of high-explosive shells for demolition, is that right? Sarah helped Ruger calculate the account. Yeah, he was full of energy when he said it, but now that Sarah calculated the account, Ruger was a little reluctant. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 336. He was reluctant to give away such a large amount of points casually. Although the points in his system had been increasing since the battle began, he had never heard of it, but the total of all these was still a little lower than the 4 complete Type 4 assault tanks. He forgot that these things were modified with captured raw materials. If he only counted the points, he would definitely make money. 4 self-propelled mortars, 120 shells, 30 shells per tank. Sarah calculated, they can only fire 8 shells per minute like Tia's tank. Ruger smiled awkwardly, it's different if they are the same. They can only fire 6 shells per minute at most. Seeing Sarah frowned, he hurriedly added, I didn't install an automatic loader on them. Taiwan Novel Network rightward arrow. It will take a while for the loader to load a 60 kg shell into the barrel by himself. A loader is needed. Sarah frowned even more. So a tank like this needs 3 crew members. Driver, gunner, loader. I don't have enough manpower here. It doesn't matter. You don't have enough manpower, right? Let me be the gunner. Tia came out of the Leopard 2 turret again. You are everywhere. Before Sarah could speak, Ruger said angrily. This is a World War II old cannon. Are you sure you can come? He patted Grizzly and said. Hey, don't let me stump you. Tia pouted. Do you have enough electric-driven remote control devices on your towed howitzers? Don't tell me you don't have any. If you don't have any, just take them off your howitzers. Install them in this turret, extend the wires a little, and integrate them into a row of control panels for me. It won't take you 3 minutes, right? Isn't that done? Ruger was speechless for a moment. There was no way, he was as familiar with Tia as Tia was with him. There was nothing wrong with the bomb girl's idea. The only problem was that if Ruger used this electric-driven remote controller to adjust the muzzle direction, he would have to try to fire 1 or 2 correction rounds to ensure accuracy. However, this problem did not exist for Tia at all. The bomb girl, well, should now be called the Cannon Queen. The Cannon Queen only needed to glance at the direction of the muzzle to roughly estimate the landing point of the shell. Of course, she also had to try to fire a shell of the same specification so that she could have a reference. However, she only needs to watch once for the same specification of cannons firing the same specification of bullets. So, with the 4 self-propelled mortars in her hands, she only needs to aim once at any vehicle and fire a round. After that, she can ensure the accuracy by using the remote control. Talent is so unreasonable. Okay, let's do it. Lugger sighed and reluctantly agreed to Tia's plan. Hey, what's your attitude? I'm helping you solve the problem. Why do you look so reluctant? Tia raised her eyebrows. How could that be? Madam, you worry too much. Lugger quickly changed his face and said flatteringly, well, if there's nothing else, I'll go and prepare it now. Seeing that he changed his attitude, Tia nodded with satisfaction. Just as she was about to let him go, she accidentally glanced at the grisly self-propelled mortar and frowned as if she suddenly remembered something. Madam! Madam! Ruger saw her tilting her head as if thinking about something. After asking twice but she didn't agree, he turned around to find a place to remotely control the logistics space to build the remaining 3 self-propelled mortars. But just as he turned around and was about to leave, he heard Tia shouting as if she had just woken up from a dream, I remember it. I was wondering why this thing looked so familiar. Brother Lu, don't leave, come back to me. Do you have another self-propelled mortar that looks very similar to it, but with a much larger main gun caliber? Don't lie to me, I've seen it before. That thing has been repaired by you a long time ago, right? Otherwise it wouldn't be parked there. I want that thing, this time, now, right away. A self-propelled mortar with a main gun bigger than this. Sarah was also interested in what Tia described, and looked at Ruger with curiosity. Someone who was busy directing the construction of the tanks was almost at the side of the Boxer 155mm gun in the last row of the battle formation, but was stopped by Tia. He turned back with a wry smile. He knew what Tia was talking about. What could a self-propelled mortar that looked very similar to the late model of the Panzer IV assault tank in the World War II era of the Zoo be? Yes, it was the legendary thing. The Strong Tiger self-propelled assault gun. Or, the Assault Tiger self-propelled mortar. This monster mortar with a caliber of 380mm but only 4 times the diameter, installed on the chassis of the Tiger heavy tank, fired a special matching rocket-assisted grenade. That shell weighed 324 kilograms. 3 shells weighed nearly 1 ton. Not to mention, the high explosive shells of this super heavy gun were basically used to demolish buildings. Other targets were difficult to hit with its super heavy gun with a slow firing rate, slow projectile flight speed, and low attack distance. It is only useful when attacking targets that cannot escape, such as buildings and fortifications. This thing was also confiscated by Ruger in the ghostly dungeon. However, it was not a complete version at first, and there was only a severely damaged chassis and only half of the turret. As for the main gun, because the thing itself used a special inner and outer double-layer barrel structure, there were enough spare materials, allowing Ruger to restore it easily. This whole car itself was useless, and there were many missing parts, so Ruger had always placed it in the corner of the parking lot of the bunker facility in the logistics space. When making other tank guns, there were any extra scraps suitable for it, so he took it and repaired it, and used it as waste. As a result, after such a slow process, he really repaired the thing completely. Even the huge pit that had to use its own hangar to complete the reloading and even loading was solved by him with a set of sturdy and powerful industrial robotic arms. Later, Tia ran to his logistics space whenever she had something to do, just to see if he had any other good things hidden, and naturally saw this thing. Ruger actually wanted to see how powerful this thing really is. What is it called? Who wouldn't want to light up such a big firework and see it? So when Tia first noticed this thing, Ruger recommended it to her, but the Cannon Queen, who was obsessed with looks, easily rejected it. Didn't you think it was too ugly and said you would never use it? Ruger also imitated Tia's demeanor and tone at the time, with his hands on his waist and his chin raised, pouting. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shan Mao Ai-Chi-Ji. Chapter 337. It's too ugly, I'm not interested, Ruger said. Did you say that? Haha, it's acting like that. Yes, Tia is like that. Tia didn't say anything, but Sarah clapped her hands and cheered. It's a different time. Tia made a face at Sarah, turned to Ruger and shouted, I wasn't interested then, but now I am. Just tell me whether you will give it to me or not. Yes, 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 how can I not give it to you? Ruger said helplessly, I'll let you use it later, okay? Is it okay? I'll get busy. If I waste a little more time with you, the 1-hour break will be all used up, and then no one will give you artillery and shells. Please come, you've worked hard, and you've suffered. When he heard what he said, whether it was Sarah who was waiting for the artillery to quickly demolish the building, or Tia who was waiting for the artillery to have fun, they immediately changed their attitudes and became as attentive as maids. Well, that's about right. The strange, changeable, noisy but happy way of getting along between the three of them made the Rogers next to them stunned. As Sarah's confidants, they were the first to know that Tia and the others had done something to their boss. Although there are no taboos in the apocalypse, and they have long seen that their boss has some feelings for someone, they are still a little worried. Now looking at this family of three, well, they are not worried, but they are still sweating. Looking at the three of them, they are really sweating. Time passed quickly. In a blink of an eye, an hour has passed. In order to make up for the loss of Ruger due to various interruptions one after another, Sarah even gave him 10 more minutes. When he returned to the front of the battle formation again, with a more intense white light, 3 Grizzlies assault guns and the Assault Tiger self-propelled mortar were also refined near the first Grizzlies. There were 5 self-propelled mortars, arranged in a W shape. The one in the middle and the front was naturally the Sturm Tiger. After summoning them, Ruger immediately ran to the 4 Grizzlies' turrets, let out a cable from each of them, and gathered them all to the top of the turret of the Sturmtiger's self-propelled mortar. Seeing him so self-conscious, Tia, who had just gotten off the 3-color camouflage Leopard 2, threw herself into his arms with satisfaction and gave him a big slap. Then she jumped to the top of the Sturmtiger's turret in 2 or 3 steps and fiddled with the integrated control panel consisting of 5 sets of buttons. After confirming that all the buttons were working properly, she sneaked into the turret and directly used the sighting system on the Sturm Tiger to adjust the muzzle. Ruger knew that she had never fired a mortar, so he made a mark on the sighting system. When Tia aimed at the target at that position, and then adjusted the elevation and direction machine to the same marked position, it could ensure that the shell in the barrel hit accurately. It was a kind of zero-point design on the artillery. Seeing that Ruger was so considerate, Tia ran out with great relief, gave him another shot, and then ran to the Grizzly to fiddle with it in the same way. After finishing the second one, she did not go to the turret of the third one, but went back to the Sturm Tiger directly. Is it ready? She asked Sarah, who was curiously looking around. Yes, it's ready. Hearing Sarah's words, Tia turned back, chose a suitable angle of view, and could see the muzzle of the Grizzly and the cathedral not far away, and then pressed the launch button of the corresponding gun vehicle on the control panel. Puff. A sound that was completely different from ordinary artillery and similar to a mortar sounded. The 60-kilogram projectile in the Grizzly, which was improved by Ruger, was like a basketball thrown by a long shot, drawing a parabola with a great curvature in the air, and slowly fell into the roof of the cathedral. Boom! More than 10 kilograms of high-explosive bombs exploded instantly, directly blasting a large gap in the roof of the cathedral that looked like a castle. Countless broken bricks and tiles were shattered. As the gap appeared, all kinds of reptiles inside the cathedral gushed out along the gap like wasps whose nests were dug out. Sarah, who was still sighing that Ruger's refueled shells were really useful, immediately became serious when she saw this scene. "Quick, prepare to fight." While shouting the order, she also ran towards her dark green painted Leopard 2. The gunner on her car had been arranged to replace Tia in charge of Ruger's Leopard 2. "Tia, don't stop, keep firing." When she jumped on the turret and was about to drill in, she turned her head and shouted to Tia behind her. "That's what I meant." Tia wrote down the trajectory of the Grizzly main gun, pressed the automatic reload button, and began to correct the muzzles of the other 3 Grizzlies. And after correcting each one, she immediately fired a shot. According to Ruger's requirements, the firing rate of each Grizzly assault gun must be controlled within 6 rounds per minute. That is, 1 shell every 10 seconds. Tia staggered the firing time, just enough to ensure that the next shell would be fired every 2 or 3 seconds, forming a series of continuous firepower. Soon, all 4 Grizzlies' first shells were fired. The gap in the cathedral roof also changed from 3 to 1. Tia's 4th shot just collapsed the middle connecting part of the 3 gaps created by the first 3 shots, connecting the gaps into one. The small gap became a large gap, and the monsters pouring out of the cathedral naturally became more turbulent. Before, there were only some small monsters such as spiders, blood eagles, ghosts, and bristly rats. Now, let alone the skeleton zombies and blood-sucking mages, even various high-level demons are coming out of the big hole. As a result, the pressure on the front-line rogues responsible for clearing the monsters increased suddenly, and they even had to retreat to exchange space for time and strive for more firing opportunities. Infantry fighting vehicles and infantry had to retreat, and the tanks on the front line could not stay in place, and they had to make corresponding adjustments. Sarah, who served as the gunner on the Leopard 2, sent a long and thin tungsten alloy steel needle to those large elite monsters, and couldn't help shouting, "The pressure on the front line is too great, Ruger, think of a way." After giving the Leopard 2 to Sarah's gunner, Ruger stayed near Tia's artillery formation. His current role is a humanoid ammunition feeder. The 5 self-propelled mortars themselves have little ammunition on the internal ammunition racks. After he added the auto-loader, the ammunition was further reduced. Each Grizzly had only 15 rounds of ammunition. As for the Sturmtiger, it only had 6 rounds. With such a small amount of ammunition, he could only transfer the ammunition from the logistics space to the ammunition rack by himself to complete the ammunition replenishment. He had no place to go. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 338. After hearing Sarah's words that the pressure on the front line was too great, Ruger thought about it and found that he had no choice but to release his 88-inch artillery array. He was about to say hello to Tia on the top of the turret of the Sturmtiger and go down to make arrangements. However, before he could speak, Tia shouted, "Protect your ears." At the same time, the Sturmtiger main gun, which had been silent all the time, roared for the first time. Boom! This shell was slower than the Grizzly, and it drew a parabola with a slightly lower curvature in the air, and actually fell straight into the large gap in the roof of the cathedral. However, it was unknown whether it hit some structure above the church in the middle of the way, and it actually triggered the impact fuse before it landed. Not long after falling into the gap, it fell at most 2 or 3 meters before it exploded directly. This explosion was really like a tsunami, and the surrounding battlefield was shaken. A high explosive bomb weighing nearly half a ton, and Luger added magic stone raw materials, the power of the explosion is simply terrifying. The surrounding environment is almost triggered by an earthquake, and the monsters in the center of the explosion suffered heavy casualties. Now there is no need to distinguish between nightmare level and ordinary monsters, nor cannon fodder and elites. After one shot, not to say that all of them are broken into pieces, but at least there is no intact body of a monster near the center of the explosion. Yes, after this heavy artillery bombardment, the hard outer wall of the cathedral that was shaken but not shattered before inevitably collapsed, revealing the internal structure that had been blown apart for the most part, with only a few supports left, and it was crumbling. This thing is so powerful," Sarah couldn't help shouting, "come on, another one." "I can't come." Tia waved her hand over there, "the next shell will be at least 15 seconds later. But the good news is that there are enough small shells." As she said, the small muzzles of the 4 grizzlies also began to sound. Well, compared with the large cannon of 380 mm caliber, the 150 mm one is really a small one. The caliber is more than half smaller, and the charge is 5 or 6 times less. The situation that the 380 mm cannon would shake the earth and mountains with one shot did not happen again, but the 150 mm mortar, which fires once every 2 seconds, can still knock down a brick wall. It's just that it's always easier for people to go from frugality to luxury, and it's difficult to go from luxury to frugality. After seeing the noisy scene of the explosion of hundreds of kilograms of explosives before, Sarah no longer feels anything when she sees this small cannon. Well, okay, it's better than nothing. She held it in for a long time before she said reluctantly. Hearing her words, Tia's eyebrows jumped, and she wanted to argue with her, whether 4 thinner cannons were really not as good as 1 thick one. But before she could say it out loud, she thought about it for a while, her face turned red, and she swallowed back those words that were easy to cause misunderstanding and were quite violent. However, this did give her an idea. Next time, she must let a certain female rogue who is not very capable but has a big mouth taste the taste of 4 150 cannons and 1 380 cannon to see who is better. Compared with the 2 women who don't know what they are thinking about, Rogue's mind is much simpler. His mood can be described in one word: cool. Just that earth-shaking cannon just now actually directly provided him with a full 4-digit points. Counting it up, there are nearly 100 nightmare-level monsters that died in that cannon just now. 1 cannon fired, and it actually has the points of completing a high-risk and difficult task before, which almost made someone shout out in excitement. Fortunately, he controlled himself, otherwise, coupled with the conversation between the 2 women and their unspeakable thoughts, he might have made a mess. This incident still had a great impact on him. On the one hand, the probability of the system triggering tasks has been particularly low recently, which made him feel a little unhappy. But now, looking back, it doesn't matter if there are fewer task points. The real thing is to tap the potential of the ally module. Earning points through tasks is equivalent to doing odd jobs for others. Even if it is a small job, or the work period is only a few weeks, the daily salary may not be much higher than that of pure work. But earning points through the ally module is equivalent to opening a business. The initial investment is quite large, and it is very likely to encounter a bottomless pit. But as long as you hold on, you can make money very quickly. For example, now. If it weren't for Sarah, his ally, even if he had the Sturmtiger self-propelled mortar on hand, where would he have the opportunity to use it? Even if he found an opportunity to fire a cold cannon at the monster group, without Sarah's subordinate siege and clearing, this cannon would just blow up the monster nest, and it is hard to say how much damage it can cause to the monster itself. Let's take a step back. Even if he really gained a lot, how can he escape from the monsters that have been poked in a hornet's nest? Rely on the mobility of the Sturmtiger? Forget it, it's a Tiger chassis, it's good enough to be able to move, why do you need mobility? Or put it back to the logistics space and change to another vehicle to run. However, it takes time to retract and release such a large thing in the logistics space. Otherwise, Lugger used high-lumen flash bombs as magic props to perform alchemy. Is it just to maintain the persona of the alchemist master? Isn't it to buy time for the retraction process? In a sense, his trick is really the same as performing magic. It doesn't work with the tank itself, nor with the logistics space. In the end, the most likely scenario is that he fires a heavy artillery at the monster group, gets 4,000 plus points, and then is rushed back by the monster tide, losing the tank worth 30,000 plus. Even if the tank itself is not bought with points, it will cost points to replenish it after it is lost. Or he can find a way to recover the tank after the monster tide recedes. But it is hard to say what kind of damage the tank that is washed away by the monster tide will be. In the end, the 4,000 plus points will still be filled in as repair costs. This is the so-called high risk. If there is only one person or a team, Ruger can only use medium tanks or infantry fighting vehicles that are fast enough, at least faster than the monster tide, and naturally there is no chance to use heavy artillery to collect points. Therefore, even if we do not consider the function of calculating points for killing subordinates that comes with the ally module, the potential of the ally module is worth exploring just because there is such a group of people to create a safe output environment for themselves. Ruger was sighing at the generous income, while Tia fired 6 150mm mortars in a row and finally fired another 380mm rocket-assisted high-explosive bomb. Under this heavy artillery, the walls of the cathedral that were still lingering finally couldn't bear the weight and collapsed with a noisy sound of material breaking. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shan Mao Ai-chi-ji. Chapter 339. It took only a few minutes for the most core and solid building in the monastery, the Blind Eye Cathedral, to collapse so easily. This speed and efficiency far exceeded Sarah's initial expectations, causing her to blush and shout excitedly, "Okay, okay, keep going. Don't stop. Keep blasting the floor. Got it?" Stay calm. Tia, who was operating the artillery, now showed the style of a master. After sending the Sturmtiger to reload again, she immediately corrected the trajectory of the 4 grizzlies and blasted towards the group of monsters in the ruins. Of course, things were not as simple as Sarah shouted when she was excited. If you want to continue to blast the floor of the cathedral, you must first clean up the broken bricks, tiles and wood that have just collapsed on the ground. Otherwise, these messy broken parts are equivalent to a layer of composite armor laid on the ground, which can best absorb the energy of the explosion shock wave. But the biggest obstacle to cleaning up these broken parts is still the huge number of monsters. Now that the cathedral has collapsed, the monsters that use it as their home will gradually lose strength. But so far, they are still nightmare level. Letting so many monsters attack the battle formation formed by the rogues is still very risky. So without saying anything, Tia began to use heavy artillery to eliminate the monsters that gathered together. The Blind Eye Monastery is very large, and the total area is probably thousands of hectares. In China, it is also the scale of a new industrial park in a third-tier city. This means that even if the length and width of this area are similar, it takes 3 or 4 kilometers to walk from east to west, or from south to north. This is not to say how much wealth the Blind Eye Sisters could have plundered. It is mainly because they built the monastery on the famous East Gate Fortress. According to the history of this world, the 2 island continents facing each other across the sea, the East Continent once organized an invasion of the West Island. In the name of the Church of Zakarum. It sounds like a magical modification of the Crusades, but the prototype behind this history is more of the Norman invasion. It is the family of the Norman Duke who first surrendered to West Frank and then invaded Britain to truly unify the 7 countries in England for the first time. In the history of this continent, the invaders from the East Continent also suffered 2 disastrous defeats in the north and the east. The corresponding ones are probably Scotland and Wales that were not conquered. Apart from this, all other areas of the West Continent were conquered. The East Gate Fortress is an offensive and defensive war fortress built by the conquerors of the East Continent in the Taimur Mountains during this conquest. Because of this, the monastery here was built in such a rugged area that is easy to defend and difficult to attack, and it covers a large area. Even this cathedral was the Holy Light Cathedral built by the Lakis conquest army of the Kyrgyzstan Kingdom of the East Continent, which originally used Zakharum as its state religion. After a series of means including but not limited to war, marriage, and conspiracy, the general Lakis from the East Continent finally conquered the West Continent and established the Kingdom of West March in 1060 of the local calendar. As we all know, the Norman conquest took place in 1066 AD. Similarly, during the period of the Seven Kingdoms of England, there was a kingdom of Mercia roughly located in the center. Mercia is the Latinization of the Old English Anglo-Saxon language, which means men of march, people on expeditions, or a country established by expeditioners. March comes from French, meaning expedition. The meaning of Mercia is also very clear, that is, the two Germanic tribes, the Anglo-Saxons, started from the periphery of the Saxon forest, traveled a long distance, migrated and expeditioned, entered the British Isles, killed or robbed and drove away the local indigenous people, Celts, and occupied other people's territories to establish a country. The name of the country Westmarch has a bit of double entendre black humor. French-speaking expeditioners coming from the west. Well, it makes sense. The East Gate Fortress was originally designed to facilitate the Kyrgyzstan conquest army of Lakis to transport supplies from the east of the sea to the western continental port city of Luodu, and then from Luodu all the way west through the Taimur Mountains to support the war in the front. But after the conquest of Rockies, the so-called front line had become the independent kingdom of West March, and the relationship with the former sovereign, Kyrgyzstan, was somewhat ambiguous. The East Gate Fortress, a central fortress that could attack and defend from east to west, had no value. It was abandoned naturally until 100 years ago, when a group of mercenaries who had drifted here settled here, namely the Blind Eye Sisters and the Rogues. Before the cataclysm, with the Taimur Mountains as the core, to the west, including the dark forest to the stone plains to the blood wasteland rogue camp, and even as far as Tristram in the west, and to the east, across the mountains into a considerable part of the desert area, this area was already the territory of the Kingdom of Honduras. To be precise, it is probably the complete territory of the so-called Kingdom of Honduras. This kingdom is an ally of West March in the west, but it is also controlled or canonized by the Kingdom of Kyrgyzstan, Empire, and the Church of Zakharum across the ocean. The warrior hero of the original first generation, the Dark Wanderer controlled by Diablo in the second generation, and the biological father of Tia's mother Leah, Aiden, is the prince of the Kingdom of Honduras. His father is the corrupted and fallen Mad King in his lifetime and the Skeleton King after his death, King Leoric. This King Leoric was originally a member of the royal family of Tranviken in the East Continent, a devout believer of Zakharum, and was canonized as the Kingdom of Honduras. By the way, during the western expedition of Rakis and the process of King Leoric accepting the canonization, some of his followers were paladins of the Church of Zakharum. These people, plus some adventurers from the East Continent, are almost the entire source of the paladins in the town of Rogue. In short, from the fact that the area near the East Gate Fortress has become the territory of the Kingdom of Honduras, it can be seen that after the founding of West March, this part of the area was regarded as an intermediate buffer zone with the original suzerain state of the East Continent. Then it is understandable that the East Gate Fortress was abandoned. In short, the reason why the Blind Eye Monastery of Rogues was so difficult to capture after being occupied by monsters was related to the fact that its predecessor was actually the East Gate Fortress built during the conquest of Rakis before the founding of West March. The difficulty that the East Gate Fortress caused to Sarah's rogue troops was not limited to its easy-to-defend and difficult-to-attack terrain, large area, and solid buildings. Because this place was once a war fortress during a protracted war of conquest, it was used as the core church of the fortress cathedral by the Zakharum Church, so there is such a large underground tomb under it. That is why countless corpses are buried there. Infinite Doomsday start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 340. Many of those corpses were masters of the Lakis Expeditionary Force when they were alive. Google search reading. The monsters transformed from these corpses are numerous and powerful. As for the Zakaram Church, it is obvious who this is copied from. The Roman Catholic Church began to encourage the construction of underground tombs under churches during the ancient Roman Empire, so later in the churches of the first largest sect of the second largest branch of a certain religion that evolved from it, there were often underground tombs. If not, relying solely on Andariel and the intermittent connection with the burning hell, it would be difficult for her to summon such a large number of monsters with such strong combat capabilities here. Well, the combat capabilities of the monster army have not been shown since Luger intervened in the war. How does the saying go? No matter how powerful the medieval heavy armored knights are, facing an artillery unit in the Second World War, they can only sigh at the artillery, and die as many as they come. Although the artillery on Luger's side is not large in number, the quality is seriously exceeded. Whether it is the quality of the gun itself or the quality of the ammunition, it is at least at the level of the divisional artillery regiment. This means that his artillery is not used for small-scale battles from the caliber to the power, but is a high-powered weapon that only appears in division-level corps battles. It is enough to use small and medium-caliber artillery to bully the medieval heavy cavalry, not to mention that he actually uses the divisional heavy artillery. Then it is not normal that they cannot play the original combat capability advantage. Who can play any high-end tactics in the cold weapon era with 150 mm and heavy artillery? Even if these monsters of at least nightmare level are far stronger than ordinary human infantry in terms of attack power and defense power. But no matter how strong they are, it is impossible for each one to be equivalent to the Tiger heavy tank, right? Those monsters that are relatively fragile can be ignored. Their protection level is about the same as that of the Type 1 tank. They have the protection power of a homogeneous steel plate armor, that's it. But the protection power of most whiteboard monsters is only at the level of the Type 2 tank. The protection of the homogeneous steel plate armor is 30 mm in front and 16 mm in the sides and rear. This means that its strongest defense is equivalent to 30 mm homogeneous steel plate, and most of the normal defense area is equivalent to the protection of 16 mm homogeneous steel plate. The protection level of 16 mm homogeneous steel plate is just enough to allow 62 mm caliber full-power rifle bullets to penetrate the same part with 2 consecutive shots at a distance of 20-50 meters. If it is replaced with the same caliber armor-piercing bullet, at a distance of 20 meters, one shot can penetrate the protection of 16 mm homogeneous steel plate. Because the 762 rifle in Rogg's hand performed at this level when attacking nightmare-level monster cannon fodder, Ruger roughly inferred the defense of these nightmare-level cannon fodder monsters based on the data of the homogeneous steel plate. That is, the level of the Type 2 tank mentioned earlier. Even a 762 full-power rifle bullet can penetrate most of the harder areas of those monsters except the hardest ones with 2 shots at close range. So Ruger only needs to make some adjustments to the fragments of the heavy artillery to make it easy for the grenades fired by the Grizzly assault gun and the tank gun of the Horsebear tank to penetrate the defense of those basic monsters. Of course, monsters are not just basic cannon fodder. The defense of those rat spiders is not high in itself, even after becoming nightmare-level monsters, their defense is just like that. But when it comes to the level of skeleton warriors and goat-headed warriors, once they become elite, their defense can at least be improved to a higher level compared to the blue monsters and even bright gold monsters in the original game. For example, the protection of the 32 mm to 50 mm homogeneous steel plate of the J-type of the 3rd tank. A little stronger, further, it is not impossible to reach the 50 mm to 80 mm homogeneous steel plate protection of the H-type of the 4th tank. However, there are not many monsters that can reach the strongest 100 mm homogeneous steel plate protection of the Type 5 and Type 6 tanks, that is, the Leopard and Tiger. The protection of the Type 1 and Type 2 tanks can be easily penetrated by the rogues even with a 62 mm caliber full-power rifle bullet, as long as they do not deal with their hardest parts. After the firearms of the core elite rogues who came with Sarah were all replaced by Ruger with 7x 99mm caliber and Browning heavy machine gun bullets, even elite monsters with protection similar to that of the Type 3 tank can be injured with 1 shot, disabled with 2 shots, and killed with 3 shots within 200 meters. Of course, these bullets must be aimed at the same part that is not the most defensive. In this way, when Tia's heavy artillery bombarded, the cannon fodder was either dead or disabled. The rest rushed towards Tia in the direction of the artillery fire and were firmly blocked by the heavy machine gun bullets of the rogue elites. At this time, only elite nightmare-level monsters with defense at least at the level of the Panzer IV type, and the type with an advantage in defense, can break through the defense line of the rogue heavy machine gun array. Then, what is used to deal with them at this time is no longer guns, but the tank guns of several tanks. Take the 4 anti-tank gun as an example. Its penetration at a distance of 1 km is enough to penetrate 100 mm homogeneous steel plate. This means that even if the defense of the elite monster on the opposite side is really at the level of the Tiger, there is a high probability that it will be directly penetrated by the gun of the horsebear medium tank. What? This is not safe enough? Afraid that the monster's defense can reach 150 mm homogeneous steel plate? It doesn't matter. Although the rifled gun on the Little Leopard medium tank is also 75 mm, it is a 70 caliber gun with a penetration depth of 194 mm at a distance of 1 km. Is this all right now? Still not okay? If still not okay, there are 2 Leopard 2s with 120 mm caliber and 44 caliber smoothbore guns. The tail-stabilized armor-piercing projectile at the level of the late Cold War has a penetration depth of 480 mm at a distance of 2 km. With such armor-piercing ability, any Tiger heavy tank can be destroyed in seconds without hesitation. If there are really elite monsters specializing in defense and charging at the rogue blockade line, and other weapons cannot break its defense, that is when the 2 Leopard 2s will show their power. What is decisive strength? The 2 Rheinmetall 44 caliber 120 mm smoothbore guns are. In this way, the entire battle formation will remain stable even if it is continuously attacked by the monster tide. Meanwhile, Tia used 4 Grizzlies assault guns to bombard the massive monsters in the collapsed cathedral, and the effect was still good. Not only was it good, judging from the series of points in the Ruger system, the effect was quite good. After the CD bar of the Strike Tiger was read, and the 3rd large caliber rocket-assisted high-explosive bomb was fired again, the sea of monsters in the cathedral once again ushered in a nightmare. It was a bit difficult to blast through the floor separated by countless debris with 1 shot of that super large caliber heavy high-explosive bomb, but it was easy to smash the monsters still climbing on the debris with a large number of large fragments. The sea of monsters in the cathedral area was emptied a lot, and the tide of monsters rushing towards the Ruger blockade line from there naturally began to weaken.